The opening question I have here is, what do we know about heaven? You know, what do you know about heaven? And you're encouraged to respond. You know, otherwise I'll just start making things up. But it's a nice place. Ultimate destination, yes. There are three heavens. Naomi's cheating because she saw the topic earlier in the week. But yes, there are three heavens. Well, and it's funny, thinking about it, like, so that's what was scheduled for this week, is this topic of there are three heavens. But yet, we're also taught there are innumerable heavens, right? Because, like, while there's three kind of levels, within them there's all these different types of heavens. You know, you have like a heart heaven, a lungs heaven, a skin heaven, you know, all these different ones in between. But yeah, there are these three different, what Swedenborg calls discrete degrees. There's continuous and there's discrete. You know, so continuous is like you're at the bottom of the water and you're swimming up higher and higher and higher, and it gets warmer, right, and lighter the higher you're in the pool or in the ocean, whatever. So that's a continuous degree. But then there's just a level that's higher, it's a real substantive change. And one of the things we're taught about heaven, and that there's these three heavens, is that there's a real distinct difference between them. It's fairly easy to kind of parse it out. The first heaven is a heaven where people are just obedient to what the Lord teaches. The Lord teaches, go to Nineveh. These people go to Nineveh, unlike our hero of the Jonah story, who goes the other way. So those people, the first heaven, they go to Nineveh when they're told to go to Nineveh. But they don't necessarily do a whole lot more than that. Next heaven up is people who love being good to their neighbors. They say, oh, well, this person needs some help. I'm going to show up and I'm going to help them. They don't do it because somebody told them to do it. They just see an opportunity. Hey, you know, Dave needs a hand. We're going to give Dave a hand. Let's just show up and do this. Next level up is people who do things because they love the Lord. One of my favorite stories about people who love the Lord is the Joseph story. And this is Joseph, Old Testament Joseph, not New Testament. And Joseph, if you recall, he's had this terrible go of it, right? Brothers sold him to slavery, and he's now at Potiphar's house. And Potiphar treats him really well. He's like, you're in charge of everything. But there's one thing Joseph isn't allowed to mess with. Anybody remember? His wife. Yeah, don't mess with my wife. It's a pretty good rule. And so the story goes, the wife throws herself at Joseph. He's young and good looking. And Joseph's line is so good. And like when I talk about David and Goliath, these 5 smooth stones that you throw when hells are coming at you, this is one of my favorite 5. How can I do that when my master has been so good to me? How could I do this to my master when he's been so good to me? And I think about the Lord and how good he's been to me in my life. And it's like, well, when I get tempted to do something bad, when the bad idea comes into my head, it's like, well, how could I do that when my master has been so good to me? All the blessings he's given me in my life, how could I do that? Just kind of throws back the hell. So maybe that's good for me. Maybe that puts me in the love of the Lord category. I don't always live in that realm, I know. But at the same time, I think that's kind of what we're supposed to be doing. Oh, no, I love the Lord so much. He's been so good to me. I'm not going to do this wicked thing. Naomi helped me out this week. She kind of almost did my job for me, like a good. Ooh, what does that say about what heaven your Naomi's going to? Loving her boss, I guess. It's a good heaven. So she went in online and made pictures on ChatGPT, right? ChatGPT or different AI, one of the many. And she's like, what does AI think heaven looks like, the natural heaven? I guess this is the text you put in. The lowest one is a lovely place. The angels there live in nice houses with hills, with beautiful trees and flowers all around. They wear lovely clothes of many different colors. The angels who live in the natural heaven want to do what the Lord tells them, and they are very happy. So this is what AI thinks the natural heaven looks like. I love these things because even though I know they're not accurate, they're great talking points. It's like, well, so what's wrong with this picture? What do you think? Does AI have right and wrong here? Angels don't have wings in the new church, but so they added some wings on here, but it's all right. As I walk backwards, I'll show you. This is their spiritual heaven picture. This one is, it's also a wonderful place, according to the text. They live on high hills with orchards, so it's also a wonderful, happy place. And then, of course, you have the celestial heaven. They have wood houses instead of stone. Their clothes are brighter. It's a wonderful place, right? And this kind of stuff's great for kids to kind of give them some sort of a concrete imagery. But when I started anticipating that there wouldn't be little children here today, I thought, well, I want to give you something a little bit more than these, because one of the things I think adults suffer from when it comes to heaven is a lack of vision. I think sometimes we just don't get how good it really is. We see, oh, well, it's a wood house. Well, we can comprehend that. We can say, oh, a wood house for stone house. Well, maybe I'd like to have a stone house myself, actually. Stone seems pretty good. But when you look into the writings, if you go into one of the search engines, New Search or heavenlydoctrines.org, and you start putting in words like indescribable or beyond description, things along that line, it's always going to be referencing heaven. If you look at Swedenborg's stories about hell, it's concrete. You understand it. It'll be like, oh yeah, it's like a big stinky swamp. It's a smell that's so bad, and there's screaming and there's torture, and it's no fun. The people look terrible because their skin is nasty with pustules, and their faces are emaciated. All these things we can picture. But when you get to heaven, it says, nah, can't describe it. Can't describe it. It's so beautiful. It's so amazing. You suffer from a lack of vision. One of the joys of my job is people tell me about some of the experiences they've had spiritually, where they've had a dream or an encounter or whatever, and they all come back and say the same thing, that heaven was beautiful, and they can't put words on it. A childhood friend of mine, her father passed away 2003, 4, somewhere around there. He worked for the church, and his job, he was a professional interpreter. He knew like 11 languages fluently. And he had in his last days, he had cancer. And so as he's transitioning out of this world, he's out of it. He loses consciousness. And the family all knows that he's not long for this world. And as many of you may have known, sometimes people, they pop back out of consciousness before they go off. And this man, he pops back into consciousness, and the words he says is like, the beauties, they're undescribable. And my friend says to me, she says, Todd, my dad knew a lot of words. He spoke 11 languages. He knew a lot of words. That he can't come up with a word to describe what he's seeing is pretty impressive. I'm like, well, you got a good point there. You got a good point there. If he didn't know the word for it, who does? Swedenborg didn't know the words for it. I have in here somewhere something I wanted to read you. Because how many of you want to go to heaven? Yeah, we all want to go to heaven. How many of us have this idea that we want to go to the celestial heaven? Most people don't admit, oh, yeah, I want to go to the highest heaven. That's my goal. Most of us people that I encounter say, I'd like to be able to just barely cross that threshold into the lowest heaven. If I make that, that'll be good enough. That'll be sufficient for me. Thank you. But I have met one person in New Church circles, and she's very much like, yeah, I want the highest heaven. I want the best one. And I thought that was peculiar at first. And then the more I thought about it, I was like, well, actually, maybe she's got it right. Maybe I should be a little more ambitious because of what this passage says. This is Divine Love and Wisdom, number 202. Light reading for a children's talk. There are 3 heavens in the spiritual world. The angels in the highest heaven are better in every respect than those of the intermediate heaven. And the angels of the intermediate heaven are better in every respect than those of the lowest heaven. Because of these levels of perfection, angels of the lowest heaven cannot even approach the threshold of perfection of the angels of the intermediate heaven. And these latter, in turn, cannot approach the threshold of perfection of the angels of the highest heaven. This may appear paradoxical, but it is the truth. Experience has taught me that there is such a difference between the angels of the higher and lower heavens in feelings and thoughts, and therefore in speech, that they have nothing in common. Communication happens only by correspondences that arise through the Lord's direct inflow into all the heavens, and the indirect inflow through the highest heaven to the lowest. Because of the nature of these distinctions, they cannot be expressed in earthly language. So I cannot describe them. Angels' thoughts do not fit into earthly concepts because they are spiritual. They can only be expressed and described by angels in their own language and words and writing, but not in human ones. This is why it says that people have heard and seen indescribable things in the heavens. It goes on. Point is that the base level, low heaven, is probably beyond your comprehension. And even if you were there, the next level up is beyond the comprehension of the first angels. And the second angels can't comprehend the joys and delights of the third heaven. That sounds crazy, right? And yet, if you look through heaven and hell, you read through that book, there are all these concrete images for hell. But the more he goes higher up, the more you start seeing these words, indescribable, beyond description, things like that. So what I'm throwing out for you to hear on this topic of 3 heavens is bear this in mind as you make the choices in your life. Because are you throwing away the third heaven for something of this world? Are you throwing away the second heaven for something of this world? I'm trying to encourage you that the Lord, He makes promises and He makes good on them. And it's very nice when He makes a promise saying, well, if you do this, I'll give you some candy at the end of the church service. We understand what candy is. And we think, I don't need that. Who cares? You want me to come work for some free pizza? Nah, I'm good, thanks. I know what pizza is. The Lord's saying, the blessings I have for you in heaven are beyond what you can really comprehend, which makes it hard for us to strive for those things. Because you're asking the Lord's asking you to give up something you can comprehend for something that you can't. And it's difficult for us. So that's your encouragement for the day. Strive hard because what you're going to get is better than you could possibly imagine.